always willing to learn. It's the first time at this debate I heard that policy of engagement in the 20s could prevent Stalinist terror. I always believed that it was a criminal regime founded by Lenin and Stalin and others, and whatever West did in the 20s was irrelevant. And it was Lenin who said that we'll use them as useful idiots who will sell us the very rope that we'll use to hang them. Vladimir Lenin. Then Putin comes in. So that was probably the gravest mistake Yeltsin made. And we had a KGB lieutenant colonel 9 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. First thing he did, he restored Soviet anthem, just for those who had ears to hear what was his long-term agenda. And during these years, we saw the total collapse of this feeble democracy under Yeltsin. First, it was turned into one-party dictatorship, and it ended up with one-man dictatorship, the most unstable and dangerous form of governance, because it's all about one man. It's the whole legacy of the regime based on his charisma and his ability to exalt the audience, and the whole propaganda machine works for his greatness. And again, we know from history that after running out of enemies inside the country, he turns elsewhere. In 2005, I stopped playing chess, and I turned for some people mistakenly called Russian politics, because when you say politics, you think about political parties being funded, you think about debates. Russia has no live television or public debates. You think about fundraising and many other things, elections. So I knew it was an uphill battle where my chess experience couldn't help me at all, because in chess we had fixed rules and unpredictable results. In Putin's Russia, it's exactly the opposite. And it's all happened with the engagement. I remembered how, with horror, we looked at the pictures on Russian television in 2006 when Putin was hosting G7. I never called it G8. For me, it was always G7 plus one. By the way, that was given to Yeltsin as an advance. It was like a preliminary reward. Russia was not a democracy, was not a great industrial power. China never made to G8, India never made to G8, Russia did. And how could we attack Putin and his democratic values if we could see him being embraced and hugged by Bush, Blair, Berlusconi, Schroeder, Chirac? So Russian propaganda machine worked this for their advantage. And of course, while we're talking about the foreign aggression, I can't escape Ukraine. Of course, Ukrainian case undermines the authority of NATO and the United States. And again, it was the only way for Putin to go, because economy no longer offers him an excuse to stay in power forever, because he is now ruler for life. Everybody understands it. And he needed this aggression, as he did in Georgia in 2008, but now it's Ukraine. And let's not forget, Ukraine has been disarmed by United States and United Kingdom in 1994 by force to sign Budapest Memorandum. Few people in this audience know that Ukraine had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, more than UK, France and China combined. 1,200 nuclear warheads. If some of these warheads were aiming at Moscow today, Putin would never cross the Ukrainian border. So if there was a signature of Bill Clinton and John Major under this document, which ended up, by the way, with disarming small nuclear arsenals from Kazakhstan and Belarus, which was very important because it created a nuclear-free former Soviet Union, but it was done in exchange for territorial integrity. And if we think that Crimea is a local, regional affair, we're wrong. Because the message that is being sent to every country in the world, you want to protect your sovereignty, get the nukes. And that's why the whole thing, Ukrainian crisis, Ukrainian war, Ukrainian tragedy, it's an issue that affects everybody on this planet. And I hope that eventually we'll recognize that it's not about isolating Russia. It's about isolating Putin's regime, which is a dangerous virus. You don't engage the virus. It needs to be contained. And yes, I agree, there was massive corruption under Boris Yeltsin, especially in the second term, when the oligarchs were ripping off the country. And these very people who were stealing these funds, they convinced Yeltsin to appoint Putin to protect them. Because they didn't care about democracy, they wanted to protect the oligarchy. With very few exceptions, these people are still around. And when we talk about Putin's friends, oh, that's great, If you're so lucky to share the same desk with Putin in the school or to be in a judo class, you are now on the Forbes list. The country, as Anne said, owned by very few families. And it's ironically, all these people that are so close to Mr. Putin, they're fighting for power, and this is it's a fight for survival. And that's the only item in Putin's agenda, to stay in power, and he will do whatever, because he has no other choice. He will commit every crime to make sure that he can stay in Kremlin.